Welcome, everybody, to whatever we're going to call this. And actually, we're just going to leave that in because we don't know yet. So Jenna and I are putting together a fantastic workshop program and a podcast show for all of you in the world of relationships and sex and dating and all the things that we all care about so much about. And yet sometimes we have sort of a weirdness going on about how to deal with it, how to be with it, how to talk about it, how to relate to it. And we want to do this from an ontological standpoint. Don't get hung up on the word. We'll address that as we go. But welcome, everybody. And Jenna, so glad to be here with you. I'm really looking forward to doing this show on a regular basis and everything we've been talking about.
Yep. So backstory, Chad and I met super randomly. We can talk about that some other time. But chatted about about just this connection between being a co-creator in the world and wanting to be in more community and not do self-help alone. And so we had a lot of synergy, but didn't know what to do with it. And then we were just personally chatting, and I was saying I was dating. I started doing a type of dating called polyamory. And then we got into this chat about what I was seeing in the world of like men in relationship, women in relationship. My clients are predominantly women, so I was seeing women all the time, but now I was seeing the perspective from men. And we just started talking and went, well, we should do something. There's just so much to talk about here that's really relevant and really timely. And there's a lot of information, but is it always helpful? Depends.
Yeah. Information is not transformation. And we live in the information age, which is another way for me of saying we live in an age that is obfuscating our ability to make sense out of most of this stuff and actually apply it to our life. And in the world of relationships, I think more than ever before, we all in our culture, in our communities, in our families need to take a step back from sort of the validation seeking, information seeking, look at me showmanship that's kind of out there, and ask ourselves, who really are we? And why do we want the things we want? And as it pertains to this program and the things that Jen and I are working on, what about the relationships you're in? The first relationship that matters is the one to yourself, yet we very rarely actually pay attention to that or want to go there because it's usually painful. There's usually things that are sort of hidden from us that we're kind of afraid of. What are we going to find if we really unpack that, dig into that thing? And yet it's affecting our power to create our own life. It's affecting our power to create the relationships with other people that we want in our life. And it's a really kind of messy, exciting time right now because a lot of the tropes and the structures and the conditions that we've all, many of us at least, who've grown up to believe this is how you do relationships. This is including the relationship with yourself, the misnomer of self-help. I don't believe you can help yourself. I think that we need others, and we only know ourselves through our relationship to others. That can be either a friendship, it could be a family member, it could be romantic. I mean, there's different types of relationships we have, and each one of those provide a window or insight into who we are. And so I think that's kind of the starting line, Jenna, is, the first relationship that matters before you even talk about a romantic or polyamorous or sexual or whatever kind of relationship out there is, who are you? And who are you as a creator, and what are you creating for your life? And understanding that our connection to our sexuality is a connection to our source of power and our power to create. And so I think where a lot of people get confused is they're so other focused in terms of their relationships. And yet the relationships keep running into challenges, problems, frustrations, or whatever's going on for people. And that's actually not because of that relationship. It's because you haven't defined the relationship with yourself first.
So what I like, the biggest thing I want to talk about there is the finger pointy blamey thing. So It's really hard for people to get over, no, but it is them. They aren't
Mm,
attentive. They weren't there for me. They did this thing. Like, the fixation on the problem is obviously them because it's them. This is what happened.
mhm,
And this is what hurt me. And so when I work with people, it is about, so yeah, I'm a psychotherapist based ontological coach. So it is about, why does that hurt you? What's going on? Why do you want to blame them? And so we're not going to naturally look at ourselves. We're going to look at what we're pointing at
mm,
as the data to then work on it. And that's the type of stuff we're going to talk about. Like, there's still something happening within the relationship dynamic that we want to work on, but we want to actually go where we can create lasting change, which is ourselves. And so that
mm,
self relationship, I just wanted to kind of talk about that, because that tendency to blame is natural and normal. We're going to do that, but we can use that to see ourselves, instead of trying to go, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to start seeing myself? Because it'll be out there already. And then we can
mhm.
use those life experiences, those relationships that are right here, right now, to see ourselves.
Yeah, I heard someone the other day, I don't know if it was on TV or something or a podcast I was listening to, um, say something to the effect, I'm probably going to botch it, but something to the effect of, um, when people sort of have these sort of epiphanic moments, these moments of awareness, like, oh, that's how I show up in the world. And this
Mhm.
person was saying, yeah, and everyone else saw that years ago, and we were waiting for you to catch up because we all saw how you were showing up, but you didn't see how you were showing up.
Mhm.
Right. So this kind of goes to what you were saying, that looking inward at who we are and what really drives us, what turns us on, what activates us, what inspires us, what our desires are. These are things that most people, kind of at best tangentially will kind of approach, but for the most part are in an unconscious reaction to, in terms of the way they structure their outer world. So your
Yep.
relationships with other people is your outer world. And it's like the old saying, wherever you go, there you are. And so,
Mhm.
we, to your point, we're often finger pointing outside of ourselves saying, this is the problem or they're the problem. Um, but actually, we're the problem. If we
Mhm.
could say problem, right? I don't think it's inherently like a defect, but in terms of
That's how
what
you're
I
going to
always,
see it. You're going to
that's how
see
you're
it
going to
as
see
a
it.
problem. And
Yeah.
so we got to, like, just call it and not try to be super fancy special, because people are
Yeah.
going to, like, the problem is, and that's what
Yeah.
will get someone to buy anything. I
Yeah.
want to lose weight. I'm going to buy the pill. I want to find the one. I'm going to buy this program. So the problem is going to be what brings us to action, because we want to solve the problem. And I think it's
Yeah.
important to say that, like, actually use it to your advantage. Like,
Yeah.
no, the problem I think is this, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But I want to go under the word problem just for a second,
Yep.
because actually, from my perspective, there's nothing inherently there a problem. There's just a question of whether there's alignment or non-alignment,
Mhm.
right? So I want to take the morality or the value judgment out of it for a second, because most of us will relate to problems as like, oh, there's some deficit or there's something wrong with me. No, there's just, your life is in alignment with who you authentically are, or it's not. And
Yeah.
if it's not, you're going to experience that as a problem. You're going to relate to it negatively, but it just is. Stop beating yourself up and just acknowledge what's going on and start to take action to address it. And how you do that is by understanding more about who you authentically are. And very few of us have done that work, incidentally. So, most of us are a walking, unconscious, habituated, reactive condition that we learned how to be and who to be from a very young age by observing our parents, by observing our friends, family, community, and we learned how to win at the world of at the game of validation. How do I get people to like me? So we think, how do I get people to do what I want them to do? And it becomes a very egotistically driven thing, and in terms of the identity, like, what do I need in the world? But very few of us have done the work of, who actually am I? There's this old Buddhist monk saying, it's a proverb, and it asks the question, who were you when you were born? Most people can't answer that question.
Mhm.
Right. So to be
We
able
went
to,
down a lot of roads. So if we're going back to, I just kind of thinking to someone listening about how do I date better and how do I fix my marriage and how do I make my husband do this and that and stuff like that. So what we're saying is what we're going to talk about is how to actually get behind in the mechanics of you being you in the world versus, because I mean, if you're listening to this, you've probably done all the things and it hasn't worked. It's worked for a
yeah,
little bit, it doesn't stay. And then what we're talking about is actually how to get at the mechanics of full
that's right.
transformation, like full.
Yeah.
I have changed my relationship to reality, which is what ontology is how to change your relationship to reality. Therefore,
Hmm.
change the mirror you're seeing, change the projection you're seeing, change your life. And there's a lot of other great authors that talk about this, but both Chad and I have programs and have been doing this for years, working with people to shift their relationship to themselves and reality so that those circumstances can align in an authentic way to who you really are. So you're not trying to be something you're not, you're aligning to who you are so that your relationships match you, so that
Right.
your career focus, we're going to talk about relationships, but I just kind of wanted to map that out a little bit more,
Hmm.
like grounded for people listening in.
Yeah. So in your practice, Jenna, maybe there's a couple things, maybe there's two or three you want to note, but what are sort of the big trend lines that you've been noticing when you're working with your clients
Mm-hmm.
on relationship issues that are, I mean, look, there's the time tested issues, I guess, that all of us could sort of cherry pick. But is there something unique that you've been seeing, say, even over I want to say the last 10 years because of the impact of social media? Maybe you don't want to go back that far. Maybe
I was
you've
like,
seen maybe you've seen a major demarcation, like, I don't know, since COVID,
I
maybe
think
just the
post
last few
COVID
years.
is the
Okay, so
biggest
all right,
shift.
then let's just talk about post COVID. So what are the trends that you've been seeing post COVID,
Mhm.
which let's be honest, what a lot of people don't want to talk about or acknowledge, probably because it's like the cave you don't want to walk into. COVID was a societal trauma
Mhm.
that has had so many far and wide-ranging effects on people's behavior. And the reality is, most people don't even know how it's affected them. They're just experiencing the outcome of those
Mhm.
effects,
Yeah.
not knowing what's the seed of the effect, right? And so
Mhm.
let's just go post-COVID. What have you been seeing in terms of people and their relationship to relationships, whether that's with themselves or with others?
So predominantly so that whole, I use the word survival mechanism is when humans get into survival. So, there's been a crunch down of, money choices that people are making, but there's also been what I kind of love is this desire to live and this desire
Mm,
to connect and this desire to get out of isolation and into community beyond living online, because I think that pushed people to want to live more.
mm,
So there was this positive effect to that. At the same time, you've got all these people who are cohabitating whether they wanted to or not, and it pressure cooked issues, that created destruction in a lot of cases to relationship, and then people just had enough, so they were able to see what they were tolerating before, and now
mm.
it's because it pressure cooked, it became intolerable. The
Right.
marriage, the self-abandonment, a lot of people self-abandoning, continuing to do things that don't work for them to keep the relationship alive. Saw a lot of that
Mm,
in marriages or partnerships.
hmm.
And then the dating world, really, effective, confident people in life feel super duper uncomfortable and insecure. And how do I date? And who would I do this? Like to feel almost like they're 12, 14 years old as far as a consciousness, like how they're relating to dating was really vulnerable and it really hard
Mm,
for them to be that vulnerable. So a lot of my coaching was navigating the vulnerability and being in consistent action, gentle with themselves. Okay, let's rewire. What do you want to get out of this? You want to meet cool people. You want to have great experiences. You want to have some companionship, and just continuing to like calm down the inner child. We can talk about that later of um deep insecurity. What if they don't like me? oh my God, they didn't call, or what do I do with this app? People don't like to not know how to do things. So there was just that insecurity of not knowing how to date at all. So
Mm,
that's like in relationship and then in the dating world. And then the dating world took on a lot of traction with just helping people with scripting things and just
yeah.
helping them be themselves in relationships. So the common thing for me helping them is, were you being yourself? Oh, do you
Mm,
know you stopped being yourself? Okay, cool. Let's come back to being yourself. Let's come back to being yourself. So being yourself within the dating structure so that you're going to meet someone who's actually a match to you. Started to get a lot more traction.
mm. So another question though, following up on that. So even before COVID, and this was a social media phenomenon,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a generational phenomenon, meaning that it was, it's kind of starting with the younger millennials, and then, Gen Y, and then we're seeing the older Gen Zs sort of exhibiting this behavior too. And this was before COVID, so I'm only guessing COVID exacerbated this trend, but the trend being that, we rely so much on these things, and it's like people were losing their understanding and their ability for how to interact with a physical human being in physical space and time
Yes.
outside of text. And then there was the whole dating swipe left, swipe right culture, this whole thing, right? There was an interview I was listening to the other day, and the host made a really interesting point. He said that when you become conditioned, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially when you become conditioned to how to interact with other human beings has been reduced to a swipe left, swipe right kind of world. Um, the oversimplification of that, it's just like, nothing about the person, really, even because whatever they're telling you on the dating profile might not even be true. So you really don't know anything about the person. We know that body language is 80% of communication, and there's energetics involved when you're physically in space with someone. So you lose all of that when you're just in either a sort of a texting kind of thing or just a swiping kind of thing. And then I'm connecting this to what you were saying
Mhm.
about COVID.
Yep.
And so then we go into COVID, and it's like a lot of those people who are doing that by choice now, that's the only way that they can largely interact. Um, so, did COVID exacerbate this trend of just, what, we're going to relate only virtually through some sort of mediated, form of communication?
I think so. I also think people got sick of it. And I see a
Mm,
lot of people going like, I'm off the apps, no more apps. And they don't see it for the tool I see it as. It's an opportunity to meet someone I wouldn't have otherwise. I'm especially, for me personally, geographically challenged in terms of I'm by a lake and I'm in
yeah,
a small town. So I see it as an opportunity and a tool because that's how I relate to reality. But to how to,
right.
what I see other people, they've had bad experiences, they're logging the bad experiences, not seeing the opportunity for self relationship and transformation through these relationships. And they're desiring to meet IRL in real life, offline. But then also being like, where, where do I meet people? I think yes, absolutely. And then there's the Instagram and DMs and just that shrunk down version of you that you can only fit in your cell phone, which would be the ego
Hmm.
of how
Hmm.
you want to be seen and who you don't want to let people see and
Right,
to put up who you think you need to be to avoid rejection, which
right.
I don't recommend. You want to encourage rejection because you don't want to attract the wrong
Yeah,
people for you. You want to attract authentic connection. So I think the desire to not be rejected is really compelling, and that's
that
great
is
because you
compelling.
can put on filters, you can put your highlight reel, look how cool you can construct this false reality that's what you think people want. But then you still feel constantly rejected because you're worried they're going to find out that,
Yeah.
right?
There's an interesting psychology behind this. Well, this goes to the sort of, there was that book that came out a number of years ago, The Disease to Please, which was like a
Mhm.
bestseller,
People
sort of the
pleasing.
validation seeking, people pleasing, so as social creatures, sort of from an ontological perspective, human beings need because we're social by nature, need to know that we're safe in terms of our acceptance with the group, right? We're not
Absolutely.
ostracized. This is why prison and, you know, being exiled throughout history has been a form of punishment. I mean, it actually wouldn't be a form of punishment if we didn't need innately to be in relationship with people, right? So the
Mhm, mhm.
ostracization of human beings is a form of punishment because of that default nature. Now, what's
And the
interesting about what
mammal
you're saying,
risk of being sorry, yeah, the mammalian risk of abandonment is freezing or being killed as well.
yeah,
So there's a deep, primal, um, desire to avoid abandonment. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
yeah, no,
Continue.
no, it's great. And so, what I find really interesting about this, you were talking about people being afraid to be rejected. So there's this saying that's kind of going around, you know, I've heard it over the last few years, rejection is protection. Rejection is
Mm,
protection,
mm,
right? And so when something doesn't go the way your ego wants it to go, it could actually be the best thing that ever happened to you. And so in this case, what you're talking about is people are building, you know, online personas, whether that's on a dating platform or on social media, same thing,
same
really.
thing. Yeah.
And we put out that side of ourselves that will gain the pleasing, the validation seeking, you know, will check the boxes to make us feel good about ourselves, but we're actually doing enormous damage to ourselves because to your point, we can't, it's either an outright lie or at best a half truth. In other words, we're not showing the other side of ourselves that we don't
Mhm.
want people to see. But just imagine, you know, everyone listening and watching, if you did use that to your as a superpower, you put yourself as you are, sort of as they say, warts and all out there. Then if someone's engaging with you, you can be authentically yourself. You don't have to worry about covering up the lie, and you know it's the real deal, that they're there for the right reasons.
And, they're not if they're not. So my favorite tool for dating is thanks for showing me who you are. If
Yeah,
someone drops off, if someone behaves in any which way, and that's like, oh, that's not a match for me, then it's just really clean. And then it's not about, am I lovable or not?
right,
That's relevant. Are we a
right,
match or
right.
not? Is
Yeah,
two humans being themselves. I have on the app, I think, I have you be you and I'll be me.
right.
Like that's my goal. Like
Yeah,
that's,
yeah,
then we could figure everything out from there. But that is harder, like, but easier said than done because we haven't been taught how to know ourselves and how to feel confident and comfortable. I
yeah.
want to talk about confidence quickly. Confidence is
Sure.
different than worth. So
Hmm.
that feeling of like, oh, did I do something wrong? Am I enough? Right? Worth, that I am enough, whether someone likes me or not, is different than confidence.
Right.
So the confidence is going to happen by being in relationship,
By
by
being,
learning
yeah,
how to talk. So that worth is literally unconditional. And so that's a commonality we're going to continue to talk about as well, is that your worth will never come from that guy, from that girl, from that relationship, from that job. So that's always already there. The confidence is stuff that we can teach. Like, here's some skills and here's some stuff, but that worth is always there and that authentic self. So that's your self relationship. That's your job to
yeah.
acknowledge and to hone and to rewire your worth is unconditional. And that's insanely freeing. And then authenticity is a consequence.
How would you define confidence?
Uh, Doing something regularly so you're good at it, then you're confident. I
Mm,
think people think I'm confident. Um, I have had deep worth issues. So I could put on the confident Jenna. I could put on the one who has it all together, but I would always be afraid someone would find out I don't have it all together. So that would be the
right.
worth issue. So I could be confident, but not have a sense of deep worth. So that's that
Right.
fake confidence. So to me, confidence is simply like, if we take the worth out of it, your value out of it, the ability to show up authentically, I would add to that, but then to do the things. I'm confident in singing because I did the amount of work it takes to be confident at singing. If I didn't do the work, I wouldn't have been confident in singing. So as a human, the ability to know yourself deeply and then know that you're good and love yourself and do that work will portray a sense of confidence. But it's because there's been attention, intention, action, desire to know yourself and to know you're enough, that will occur as confidence to other people.
Yeah. See, I think for me, it goes one level deeper. I do believe that you can get confidence by doing an action over again so that you can sort of predict your ability to deliver or perform on that action. But I think actually you can even have confidence if you've never done something before, because I would define confidence as just trust of self. That is,
Like a little kid.
yeah, just trust. I know myself and I know my abilities. And even though I've never done this before,
Yeah.
I can step into it with total confidence because I have trust of self. I think when we don't trust ourselves is
Mhm.
when we lack confidence. I think it's
Yes, and
really
that
that simple.
capacity, right? Like I'm just when you said that, I was thinking of
Yeah.
little kids that are like they haven't been taught to be afraid that they don't know how to do something yet.
Right.
And you show them something and they may get frustrated that they don't learn it, but they're not like, oh my God, can I? I don't really
Yeah.
notice that with kids as much. They're just gonna do it.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
gonna
Well,
sing
that's
the
the,
song and do the dance.
yeah. Well, they're magical that way. We are all magical, by the way. We were all kids. So we were all very sort of, it occurs to an adult as magic because kids do things that adults are like, how did you do that? And how did you get the guts to do that?
Yep.
Right. There was a great, it was in the 90s. So you could probably find on YouTube is John Stossel did this, he was with that show 2020 on ABC,
Oh
and
yeah.
he did this this sort of expose on the power of teenagers and how teenagers do the most incredible things, like this sort of like lightning in a bottle sort of moment of our period of time that I believe incidentally is accessible even as an adult. You just got to work through things. But he was saying that um, up until the age of about 25 is what they found from a brain standpoint, when the brain develops. It's different for men or
Your
women by a
frontal
couple
lobe.
of
Yeah.
years. Yeah, right.
Mhm.
But you don't have, there's this part of the brain that is literally turned off, which is the part of the brain that makes you fear risk and uncertainty and need security. This is why teenagers, do surfing on the tops of cars and they do crazy things. There's a part of the brain of, oh, this is risky and dangerous that's not working. It's just
Yep.
not there.
Yep.
And so they take these incredible risks, and some of you might hear that as a bad thing. I see it as an amazing thing because they get to kind of try on. So if you have the trust of self and you
Mhm.
have this mechanism turned on, that can be the ingredients for profound creativity, and power in one's life. And and then what happens as we get older, that part of, oh, this is risky and dangerous turns back on.
Yeah.
You know,
And
it,
it grows and mutates because we'll gather a bunch of data. I use the word
yeah,
data a lot of, oh, that didn't work and that hurt and that didn't work and that hurt and that didn't
yeah,
work. And so we
yeah,
create
yeah,
a fear residue if in a way that will prevent us from doing something unknown, and we shrink to the size of our
yeah,
fear. And then we can unravel that though and follow the aliveness back to life. And that's another common thread that we both have. It's like, no, life is alive and talking to us constantly if we can clear off those receivers
yeah,
and let life re-engage you back into aliveness. And that's always there. I believe that's the aspect of confidence too. When I'm living in alignment with life, I feel confident
yeah,
because that
yeah,
that that I know is a thing. When I'm shrinking, when I'm appeasing, when I'm playing it safe, I don't feel confident because I'm not in alignment with my aliveness, my life force. So haven't thought about that before, but that would be another thing that makes me feel
yeah,
confident as myself.
yeah, yeah.
Because
Well,
then
and
it's
that
not all
confident,
on me. It's not all on me anymore. It's me and life working together.
right. Yeah, yeah. Well, and it goes to this whole idea of confidence being sort of a trust of self thing. The other part of the equation there is, well, you got to know yourself in order to trust yourself. And so that's the
Mhm.
ontological piece, right?
Mhm.
And I think that actually, this is just my view. I don't know if this has ever been studied or if there's any research around this. But the more, so, you know, it, as an adult, the more that I've worked to unwind the conditioning
Mm.
of fear and risk aversion and all of that, that seems to just happen to, like the way you were saying, you know, we have these moments where, oh, that was painful, I'm never going to do that again. And you start to build
Mhm.
up this sort of armor, you
Mhm.
know, against life. It's like, I'm not letting life in.
Mhm.
Um, the more that I've worked to kind of break that down and dissolve that, the more I start to realize as I look back, oh, I think I knew myself better than I have in most of my adult life. I think when I
Mm.
was a teenager, I actually knew myself better. And
Hmm.
because what I've been finding is that as I've been sort of tearing down those sort of protective armor structures to keep me away from life, which has been, you know, years in the making, you know,
Mhm.
um, I found myself, it's like parts of myself that I knew when I was younger, when I was like 14 or 15 or 16 or something like that, are still there. It's like, oh, I have that feeling again, that feeling that
Yeah.
anything is possible, you know? And I had that
Yeah.
feeling back then. And so there's this window in, you know, our 20s and 30s where we start to kind of, at least most people start to kind of hole up and, you know, hide in the cave
Mm.
of their life. And I think, well, what's the midlife crisis all about? It's like the real you is pounding on the door saying, this is not who you are. You're living a life that's not
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
and for many of us, we start reacting to that, wanting to, you know, escape it, bury it, not deal with it. And and as a result of that, we end up buying the Porsche and all the things, the
Well,
crazy
we think
stuff
the
that
thing's
people
gonna
do.
fix the feeling,
Right.
and luckily it doesn't. I mean, that those are my clients, right? Like when everything looks good and everything's working, but it's not. I
Yeah.
call
Is
that
not.
benevolent pain. Like
Mm,
that pain is intense enough and persistent enough. Like it's not. People could still avoid it for a while before something bigger might transpire in their life to get their attention even more. But it's such a like gut punch pain to get
hmm
your attention to be like, hey, this isn't working,
Yeah.
so that you can make the change 10 years before that big breakdown that you're going to manifest in 10, like, that's what I noticed, right? Like whether it's that
So you've
divorce.
noticed that trend, right? So people have the moment of sort of the midlife crisis and they
Mhm.
do all the reactive things. And
Mhm.
then what is it? Like I've heard about the 7 year itch too, right? So is it like it seems to be like that 7 to 10 year window. So do you find that there is a collapse at some point? Like they just eventually they can't withstand.
Yeah. Or
Yeah.
stuff actually falls apart. Like
Yeah.
the more common thing with my clients is like pain that won't go away.
Mm.
The back pain, a gut pain, a knee pain,
Okay.
like every,
Physiologically.
yeah, because that's sort of the once that like benevolent pain that's like, oh, something's off. People
Yeah.
can ignore that, and they do.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
They don't, because they also don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They're not seeing this conversation out there a lot. Like, what do I actually do? And they think self help is this way. They think therapy. We can have a conversation about that, but they have an idea of what therapy is. They have an idea of what self help is, and then they don't know what to do. So they keep doing what they're doing until it becomes insistent, consistent, persistent that it's not working and they can't continue
Mm.
the way they've been
hmm
going.
Mm.
Then they'll find me.
Right.
They'll be like, you should talk to this
Right.
person. Because I've,
Yeah.
the people are new to me. I've had a referral based business. I haven't had to do the marketing. We're doing that now because we want to share this with the world more.
Yeah.
But people just find me because they know exactly they're in that state of, and then they will tell me, yeah, when I was 7 years ago, whenever ago, I knew, but I didn't know what to do.
Right.
And that's
Right.
really common too. They might go to a yoga class, or they might, that's
Mm.
the doing too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, oh, maybe this ayahuasca ceremony is going to do it, is like the new one.
Yeah.
Which is such a funny thing because it's such a like extreme thing to do that that people think will help them, that I find it really fascinating. There's many other paths to spirit, but
Yeah.
they're like, maybe this will do the thing.
Well, I think this comes from our culture, and I'm in like personally, I'm a fan of using the psychedelic
Yeah.
experience as an access point to new
Mm-hmm.
information or data or insight data. But you're right. A lot of people think, well, this is going to be the solution, right? And all it does is reveal to you, more of who you authentically are. You still have to do the work. You still have to
Do.
leave that session. But I think this comes from our, unfortunately, conditioning over many decades, actually directly connected to the pharmaceutical industry, which is if
Absolutely.
you have a problem, just take a pill,
Take the
right? So
pill.
there's just something that you
Yeah.
can take from outside that's going to solve your problem. This is an inside out situation that we're
Yeah.
talking about.
And that you have everything you need. It's also, you don't need the thing outside of you. So if you were to
Right.
just sit and journal and be with yourself and be with your antsy feelings and emotional capacity is another thing we talk about, the
Yeah.
two, you and I. The
Yeah.
ability to feel feelings would
Yeah.
be a more worthwhile thing to do for somebody, how to feel sadness, how to
Yeah.
feel deep pain.
Yeah.
Um, that's not being taught enough. It is
Not at
more
all.
than
Yeah.
ever, but
Yeah.
it is something to actually learn. And then your emotions become guides. But we're
Yeah.
also not taught that. I knew
Yeah.
when I was like in my 20s, because I come from trauma. So I have a different sort of like, this is what happens when you're in your teens and da da da. Because when you have trauma, everything kind of goes different. We can have that conversation another time.
Hmm.
But when I heard somewhere your emotions are guides and they're good, I was like, that's bullshit. Like, there's no way that's true. Like, I was just not convinced at all. Like, no,
Mm, hmm.
they come
Hmm.
over me at the worst times. And then and I lose myself and like the noise in your head. Like, I had no context that that could be trained.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
build confidence. Now I have confidence in my ability to feel deep sadness. It
Yeah.
doesn't make it easier,
Yeah.
but there's something there that I'm like, I can do this. I can feel it. The feelings aren't here to hurt me. I'm not going to go crazy. So emotional capacity and emotional, what did you call it?
Emotional sobriety is what
You
I
call it
refer
emotional
to it as.
sobriety.
Yeah.
Yeah. The language doesn't matter. The ability to feel feelings
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
is
The
huge.
ability to feel feelings, not suppress them, and to become curious about them. What are they
Mhm.
trying to show me and reveal to me? What's the wisdom of my emotions that's trying to come through here?
Yeah. And to let them
Right.
move, right?
Yeah.
Get out of the mind. It's like, what is that? Ouch. Oh, stop it. To let them actually move. I
Yeah,
find.
well, it's a nice sort of play on the words, but people are saying, emotion is energy in motion, right? Let the energy
Mhm.
move as opposed to, and it goes to what you were saying a few minutes ago about the physiological response. If you ignore that long enough, right? It reminds me of that book that came out a few years ago. I think it was called The Body Keeps Score or something
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just saying the same thing that our
Mhm.
emotions will manifest into dis-ease, right? The
Yeah.
physical symptoms, you talk about neck pain, back pain, it could even be
They're
more
just
serious than
stuck
that.
for so
Yeah.
long that they start
Yeah.
to form, like when you see like a tree that kind of grows around something, like
Yeah.
our beautiful adaptation mechanism as humans goes against us. It's just like a cancer. It just goes the other way. But if we can
Yeah.
learn to start to work with those energies and not be afraid of them, but we haven't
Yeah.
been taught that. So we both share the belief, like the book I'm writing is it's not your fault. Nothing's wrong with you. Like that you don't know how to do this is just like fine. It's like,
Yeah.
don't feel weird. Don't feel bad because
Yeah.
no one taught you how
Exactly.
to feel
Yeah.
feelings. No one taught you how to think, use your brain as a tool. That's what's true. Right. So yeah. But that having the capacity to feel feelings is such a huge part. Instead of going to do the ayahuasca ceremony right away, I would say learning how to feel feelings is a great place to start. Be with
Well, yeah,
yourself.
because what's going to come up in that ayahuasca ceremony, or maybe it's a psilocybin journey or whatever you're doing, if you're not ready for that, like so I've led people through these types of guided ceremonies before, not ayahuasca, but psilocybin. And, I'm very attentive to the obvious things that Timothy Leary taught us years ago about the importance of set and setting.
Mhm.
And the set part is the mindset, right? And the setting is the physical environment in which you do it. And so before, like if I'm working with someone and I'm using psychedelics as an access point for growth and expansion and knowledge of the self that we can then work with what comes up, before they even go into it, I usually will meet them for at least, 4 sessions in advance. And we're just
Mhm.
talking about things. We're just talking about how they're feeling about things, what's coming up, what's making them want to do this, sort of we're softening the edges. And, I'm also teaching them to be okay with being with heavy emotions, because if you think that I can't deal with my emotions, something's wrong, I'm going to go on an ayahuasca or a psilocybin trip, you've just booked a ticket on emotional hell if you go into that from that place, right? The difference between a bad trip and a good trip, as they say,
Mm.
is who you show up as before the trip begins, and your
Mhm.
ability to just be with the experience. So it's interesting because the psychedelic world can be a powerful training environment to be
Absolutely.
with emotions, but you need a certain foundation in place first. Otherwise, you're going to have the trip from hell,
Hmm.
because you're going to bring that into the trip. All these trips do is amplify what you already show up as.
Yeah. I was gonna add that, like, they're just gonna show you it's already there. And there are ways to gentle, slow, and kind and consistency are not sexy in our society. So those are things that I retrain people, like, hey, just start with this, just
Yeah.
start. And it's annoying to them. It's annoying to that culture of like, can I just get this done? And this is like, you could, but that's the thing that hasn't been working for you. So what if we just consistently show up for yourself every day and create that new neural pathway, but also just relationship to yourself and reality, and then the emotions and the thoughts, and then you start to develop a strength and a capacity. And then if you're really stuck and you can't see, then those are the great tools to be in ceremony in whatever capacity, plant medicine or just a ceremony. Um, that's obviously a whole other conversation that would be like relationship to energy and spirit, however we want to do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever time. But because there's just so many other things to that. But the point was that I find it fascinating that people are willing to put themselves through um puking and loss of faculties. Like, it just mystifies me that that seems appealing more appealing
Well, I
than other things.
mean, they're desperate, and I mean, some people will choose that. And I guess if neither of these are ideal, but I would prefer they at least went down the path of an insight versus the alternative, which is self-destruction, alcoholism,
Yeah.
drug addiction,
Yeah.
escapism, that kind of stuff. But the
Uh-huh.
reality is, you have to have a certain foundation, and, well, like I said, what I call emotional sobriety before you go
Uh,
into a trip like that. And so I think there's a whole big discussion that we could have as well. But it just, again, is all what we've been talking about. It seems kind of just to sum up our sort of intro talk today is the importance of trust of self, the importance of feeling your emotions, which are going to be critical to you developing a foundation of trust of self. We've been
mhm.
talking about the importance of the first relationship you have is the relationship with yourself versus in reaction to all of the other relationships that we have out there in the world. And so this has kind of been the theme of our first talk, which I think is a perfect theme for the first, conversation that you are and I are having around this. Yes, we want to talk about relationships. Yes, we want to talk about sex and romance and creative power and all of these different things that come from relationship. But if we don't start at the true beginning, the where all of this emerges from, which is who am I, the ontological question, as you said a few minutes ago, we want to move people, help people move themselves from being a human doing to a human being. Well, to be a
Mhm.
human being means to get really intimately connected with the relationship that matters most, which is yourself. And for many, many people, that is not a relationship they have nurtured or even thought about for many years.
Yeah. And that's how everything's gonna go. Like, with the all the desires for what you wanna see out there is gonna start with here. And also that niggling, "Ooh, something's wrong" thing, that you think it's your relationship or you think it's this thing over here, like, that's gonna take care of that, because the saying I say is the only thing that's missing, that feeling that something's missing, is you.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we're gonna walk you there, give you
Yeah.
tools.
Yeah. 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 Really great. Well, this has been a great first episode and talk. We're kind of doing this very organically, but hopefully those of you who are listening and watching got some value and some insights from this. And And obviously, we want to encourage everybody to stay connected to this conversation I mean, I think we're going to have to go back and listen to it, Jenna, but there were like, I don't know, a dozen topics, subtopics that came up just in this first one, which are different rabbit holes we could go down and explore, and we will.
Yeah.
But our intention is to provide value to everyone who's listening and watching so that you can begin the journey of trust of self, of knowing the self, and accessing that, creative power that is at the core of who you are. And from that, you can create the world you want to create. And in this case, the world of other relationships to other people and other
Mm.
communities. And what does that look like? We'll talk about all kinds of different topics
Hmm.
related to the sex and relationship world, the erotic world. But we've got to begin with, who are we being? We've got to start there.
Hmm.
So any final thoughts before we break this session?
I feel like, with all of this kind of stuff, like, because I just love to bring things down to where people are listening from, is that if they're feeling just like, the biggest thing I see people is just they're feeling like meh. And there's like, what's the point? And they're just trucking through getting the to-do list done, and the aliveness of life is missing for them. So there's a desire, and there, to actually to embrace those desires, to embrace that yearning for something more alive, and to not see it as wrong or bad, and to actually, we're going to start helping you unpack that, and to structure your life to start to follow those nudges and those breadcrumbs that bring you to more aliveness, and that doesn't have to be um in direct opposition to your responsibilities. That's why I see a lot of it's like, but I have stuff to do, but I can't be
Right.
happy. I have this to do. I can't choose me. What about my partner? um to trust that thing that's bringing you to more aliveness, and that you deserve that.
Yeah.
You don't have to tolerate this thing you've been tolerating for so long. That's kind of a message I would want to say for the beginning of, like, there's something that life wants for you, that is to feel deeply loved, and to feel enough, and to feel that you can express that uniquely as you in the world, without constructs and without thinking about it, that just emerges as you, and then that's deeply satisfying, and then get to
Yeah.
experience that with others, which is even cooler. It's still gonna have problems, but we'll deal with that later.
Yeah. Yeah. And your problems will be and look and feel very different when you're coming from that place than when we're coming from, more of a powerless victim to everything
Yeah.
happening to me in life.
Yeah. Those are
Right.
boring problems. We want
Yeah.
cool problems.
Yeah.
We want,
Yeah. Yeah. We want problems. We want creative problems that
yeah.
require us to be creative, you know?
Yeah.
So, well,
Cool.
this has been a great first episode, Jenna. Thank you so much. And
Yeah. Thanks.
I've really enjoyed this. This is fun. I'm really looking forward to digging into this with you and with all of you listening and watching. And, we're going to create opportunities for you, all of you listening and watching, to engage as well and connect with us. And there's more coming. So we're just getting started. But until then, we will see you on our next episode. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
That concludes this episode of The Most Important Conversations. This in-depth conversation could set you on the path to self-improvement, which is essential if you want to be an effective leader and take meaningful action in your life. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of these stimulating discussions, you can find them at TMICglobal.com. Remember, the world is at a crossroads right now. You can't afford to waste this opportunity to take charge of your life, build meaningful relationships with others, and co-create a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.